Still got that crash blocking 24 westbound to 65 northbound, the East Loop downtown. Got some election 2020 unfinished business, new developments in Georgia, and the U.S. Embassy out with a warning to any Americans in Russia. These stories and more at 10:30 on Super Talk 99.7 WTN.
Promise to get back to topics you're more accustomed to in the narrative news cycle, but right now we're just looking at the dysfunction in America and the inability to communicate between the far left and the far right and how we got here. Well, here's the perspective of a North Korean defector who issued a stark warning on woke ideology in American classrooms, believing the United States could absolutely be heading down the path of her long home rogue regime if it doesn't reverse course. Why am I and a North Korean defector on the same page today? Author Yeonmi Park discussed the parallels between the far-left indoctrination within her Ivy League education at Columbia University and the brainwashing she received as a child in North Korea. The things that I was learning at Columbia University really shocked me, because it was the exact same thing that my North Korean teachers were brainwashing me with in the classroom as a child. At Columbia University, they were literally saying that all the problems that we have is because of capitalism. It's all because of white men. And the solution for all of these problems is a communist revolution. Of course, in America, we do it in the name of equity. But who would provide such equity? Who could possibly, temporarily anyway, fund such equity? Only government. And once government controls business and once government controls everyone, that is communism. They were saying that we needed to destroy this country. We need to rebuild the country in the name of equality of outcomes. So that's the difference between us and communism. You were never promised by your founding fathers equality of outcomes. You were promised life, liberty, and a pursuit of happiness. And that promise came not from your founding fathers, but acknowledged by your founding fathers and having come from God. And in Christ, in God, in Scripture, Old and New Testament, you find your equality. Your equality is first and foremost set in a creator and his creation. See, once I buy into a creator and I, mankind, being the creation, really doesn't matter if you came out black, you came out Asian, or you came out Hispanic, or you came out Caucasian. God is sacred. You were made in his image, therefore you are sacred. Debates over aborting babies becomes a lot more commonly understood. Marriage and procreation becomes more commonly understood. Now you remove God, you begin to live in a godless equation. You open the doors to all this chaos. But your inalienable rights are life, liberty, and a pursuit of happiness. I would argue we are not a nation of life anymore. And I will warn you, you have enjoyed over the course of your lifetime turning a blind eye to failing at life at birth. Soon you're going to fail in elderly years. I have warned for decades, if you don't get issues of when life begins right, you won't get issues about when life ends right. And you're not. This is the ground rules, and this is where the seeds of division were created. Now, it's taken a whole new life on social media, which is why I encourage everyone to watch the Netflix documentary, The Social Dilemma. The very people that created these social media sites are telling you why it's creating such great divides. Your own Facebook page would give you a good lesson. You bump into an old person from high school, you guys start talking, then they're offended by your posts, then you start fighting. Next thing you know, you're unfriending. And then all that ends up in the long run being left on your Facebook are people that think just like you, read what you read, watch what you watch, listen to what you watch. Now we no longer have news. We have narratives, and now we just have narrative repeaters instead of news consumers. But we're in great extreme divides. And I've seen it in Common Ed, I've seen it in Higher Ed, I've seen it in dramas, sitcoms, movies, children's program. And then the table was set, and we see it widespread on social media. She's saying this is exactly how it started in North Korea. Start demanding the country rebuild in the name of equality of outcomes. This is how cops become bad, bad guys become good, successful people become evil, failures become noble and worthy. She said that's the same ideology that drove my home country into what is now the state of North Korea, which is basically you serve in the army or starve. She fled the rogue regime in search of freedom when she was 13 years old in 2007. Unlike many out there, found her way at Columbia University. Noted her Ivy League privileged classmates shared contorted views of oppression and real impact of capitalism. Can you imagine a woman that grew up in an oppressed country getting here and watching these free young people talk about how they're victims? No free health care, no free education, no free house, no universal income. Nothing is free in this world. And I asked them, what is it about America that you hate so much? And they would say they hate America because there's inequality. Knowing nothing about the difference between those who studied and didn't, those who passed and didn't, those who worked hard and didn't, those who took risks and started a business and didn't. Everybody just deserves the same thing. I'm telling you, we're no longer a nation under God. We're very dangerously divided states and people, and we are operating in the sin of envy. And here's a woman that fled North Korea to come here to be free, telling you, oh, I've seen this before. I have seen your future, and it's North Korea. Put that in your pipe and smoke it during the news. It's 10:30.
I'm Ken Weaver with your top stories, and we still have the left lane blocked. That is going to be the westbound downtown East Loop. It's going to be right there from 24 westbound to 65 north. Election 2020 unfinished business. A Georgia judge has ordered the partial release, that is, of a report on the grand jury investigation into former President Trump's alleged election interference. The U.S. Embassy in Moscow is telling Americans get out of Russia immediately or risk wrongful detention. It's also telling Americans not to travel to Russia. And here in Nashville, the two men arrested for the Green Hills attack go to court this week. 22-year-old Desmond Tyler today, 19-year-old Michael Green tomorrow. Green and Tyler face attempted criminal homicide charges for allegedly shooting a 26-year-old woman on January 30th as she walked late at night in Green Hills. She is recovering from at least 3 gunshot wounds. That's the latest news. Weather is next. I'm Ken Weaver, WTN News.
Hi, I'm Paul Winkler. I've been teaching investing on Nashville airwaves for over 20 years with the Investor Coaching Show. And in that time, I taught a lot about how markets work and how we invest money and academic principles of investing money. But I've also talked an awful lot about how to avoid the mistakes that people often make with their money. Think about it. A lot of people sold out of the market at the worst time when COVID struck, or when TARP happened, the Troubled Asset Relief Program, or gold, they invested in that at the worst time. Bailing out of the market because they were worried about Y2K or 9/11 or jumping into energy stocks or jumping into cryptocurrency. One of the things that I like to do is educate investors because I believe that the more educated you are, the more confident you are, and the more confident you are, the more successful you can be as an investor. Now, I not only do that on our radio show, but we do that in our offices around the Nashville region, 10 offices. To learn more about our approach to investing and financial planning, go to paulwinkler.com and set up a free 15-minute phone call. Or you can call 615-851-1950.
All right, at 10:36, we have sunshine in Franklin, 56 degrees, 55 in Mount Juliet, 56 in the borough. Downtown on Music Row, sunny skies, 57 degrees. Feels like 55 in Nashville at WTN. The Dow's up 254 at 34,123. NASDAQ's up 139 at 11,857. And the S&P's up 31 at 4122. All three are in the green. The market is up at 10:36. I'm Michael Delgiorno for Jeff Eddy's Efficient Heating and Cooling of Tennessee. Simply the best and the most affordable. Best is not my opinion. They do residential, light commercial. Service all brands, all technologies, conventional and geothermal. They're recognized by Rheem, one of the leading brands, as providing customers with the highest level of year-round comfort and service. They're an Elite Pro partner with Rheem. A diamond contractor with Mitsubishi. If electric heat is your necessity or choice, we have the best products, maintenance, and pricing. And for everyone, A-plus rated by the Better Business Bureau and licensed, insured, and bonded for your protection. They're the best. Affordable? You should maintenance your units, air conditioners in the spring, heaters in the fall. Doesn't matter how many units you have. I have 3. You may have more. Cannot exceed $125 a home. You get that back in energy efficiency, but you avoid hundreds in repair. You catch things before they break, or if you maintenance them, they don't break. And ultimately, you save thousands avoiding early replacement. Smart to do, affordable to do. Whether it's maintenance, repair, or replacement, trust who I trust all year long. Jeff Eddy's Efficient Heating and Cooling of Tennessee. 784-4424, 784-4424, or online at efficienthvac.net. All right, obviously the big question that would have probably been answered by now, I mean, the fact that nobody has made it official one way or the other shows you there's some kind of battle. Isn't that the proof that there's a battle going on? I mean, if Joe Biden was seeking re-election, he would have announced it by now. Hasn't even discussed it for 5 months. And 5 months ago, he was talking about how he was planning on it. Was going to wait till after the midterm election. Let's put it. If he's waiting union, we should have our answer by now, right? And not a peep. So the fact that we know nothing is really all we need to know, that there is some kind of a struggle going on. I was reading a op-ed piece by Ed Kilgore at Intelligencer. And his headline really kind of says it all. What would 2024 look like for the Democrats if Biden retired? And then he begins, this past week, the New York Times columnist came out and said, a good number of Democrats are thinking they like Joe Biden. They're thinking he's done a good job for as president, but they'd rather see the 80-year-old step aside. Then you start getting into reasons. The quote was, it's been widely reported that Joe Biden plans to use the State of the Union to set up his case for re-election. I think that's what he did. It wasn't a realistic State of the Union. It was a campaign speech. But now it's Monday. It's almost a week later. Why isn't it followed by the announcement that he's running for another term? This particular writer in the New York Times says there seems to be a rift within the Democrat Party about whether this is wise for an 80-year-old to do. Democrat officials are largely on board, but the public isn't. In fact, we've shared the polling numbers. 61% of Democrats do not want him to run. He'll be closer to 90 than 80 by the time his second term ends. That's a fright. I mean, Joe Biden at 80 is a cognitive issue. Being closer to 90 than 80 by the time his second term ends, that's almost too frightful. A Washington Post ABC News poll, clearly leaning left even, showed that while 78% of Democrats and Democrat-leaning independents approved of the job Biden has done, 58% of them wanted a different candidate next year. The next paragraph that this person at the Intelligencer writes is actually misleading. He says, regardless of what Democrats may want, the odds of Biden stepping aside are very low. I mean, the last time a sitting president retired on his own terms after just one full term was Calvin Coolidge. Yeah, no. LBJ had one full term. He had a portion of John F. Kennedy's term, a little over a year, that he finished. But in essence, he left after his only full term. Now, in the case of LBJ, the war was unpopular. He was unpopular. And he was going to get beat by Bobby Kennedy. That's why he stepped aside. In the case of Joe Biden, and David and I had this conversation last week on the air, it could be that Podesta sees him as the best bet again. Only this time he'll hide him in the White House basement. His problem is his party. I mean, that Washington Post ABC News poll, that's combining Democrat-leaning independents and Democrats, and you still got nearly 60% want a different candidate? That's not good. Let alone the other polling that's as high as 61% of Democrats don't want Joe Biden to run. What hasn't happened yet is the rumors. There is no Bobby Kennedy in the equation. I don't think there's a Bobby Kennedy on the horizon. Gavin Newsom wouldn't be considered a Bobby Kennedy. Kamala Harris would never run as a sitting vice president if Joe seeks re-election, so that's off the table. What's that lead? Mayor Pete? I think the player is the new governor of Maryland. But you wouldn't pull that Barack Obama card if you're Podesta until Joe agrees to step aside. This is the dilemma we're in. Party officials supposedly are fine with Biden. Voters don't want Biden, and everything seems to be frozen. And because there is no Bobby Kennedy for LBJ to read the tea leaves, it's just hanging. I mean, if you think Joe Biden's not saying anything about what's being shot down, he's not saying anything about whether he's shot down. I find this fascinating. The op-ed piece continues, regardless of what Democrats may want, the odds of Biden stepping aside are very low. The last sitting president to do it, Calvin Coolidge, although we add to that the LBJ. Plenty of Democrats worry that if Biden steps aside, the nomination will go to Vice President Kamala Harris. Not so fast. Look at her polls. Not a very... And by the way, people forget to do this, so let me just insert this. When you do approval ratings on a vice president and you see them low, you presume, see, the right gets Kamala's a loser. And even a good portion of the left gets Kamala's a loser. No. That's not how it works. There's some people on the extreme left that aren't happy with Kamala Harris because Joe gave her the poison apple of the border. Then she apologized to the world over our open borders. She wasn't left enough, can bite her. There are some on the left that don't think Joe's been left enough. But here's something we can all agree on. But the Democrats have a deep bench. Can you imagine how biased this writer would be to call the Democrats with a deep bench? Governor Whitmer of Michigan? She's in a civil war with her suburbs right now. Raphael Warnock of Georgia? How ignorant is this writer? Now, the plan was Stacey Abrams, but she couldn't win the governor's race. But it's never been Raphael Warnock. Raphael Warnock running for president with the videos of the police arriving at his home after an assault with his wife. Biden said he wanted to be the bridge to the next generation of Democrats. Well, what a weird list that is. Now, your new governor in Maryland, that's a bench. Gavin Newsom, I think they're dreading that because if they get Ron DeSantis, then everybody's going to be comparing California to Florida, and that's a disaster for the Democrats. Who then? Mayor Pete? This may be. Now, if Joe Biden took the initiative and stepped aside, then I think John Podesta would move on to the governor of Maryland instantly. I think that's his play. But if his sitting president doesn't move on, he's got to stand behind him, even though the voters aren't. And they're probably feeling pretty good if they get Trump that they'll get the same outcome. There's something this writer has missed that I don't want you to miss. There were 29 candidates seeking the Democrat nomination for President of the United States. Kamala Harris was the first to be removed and taken out of the equation. She delivered a huge early body blow to Joe Biden on race. But she was actually the first to be ruled out. She was the first of the 28 failures. Joe Biden was a failure, 4th in Iowa, 7th in New Hampshire. He only became president because they cut a deal to save the democracy. But Pete failed. Elizabeth Warner failed. It was a who's who of failures. Deep bench? Unfortunately, contested 2024 Democratic primary probably wouldn't be a calm, deliberative process. It would be more likely a nasty slugfest leading to a shaky general election campaign. This is all being considered. This is why you're better off with Sleepy Joe at 80 than going through that. Democratic candidates would find themselves scrambling to put together a national campaign. Here are some likely consequences of a sudden Biden retirement. Kamala Harris would run. Problem is, she wouldn't clear the field. So the field would arrive. Candidates would flood the race. You'd be right back where you were that led you to South Carolina and cutting a private deal. I mean, I think Gavin Newsom, he's got Gavin Newsom and Gretchen Whitmer on the list. The only one I would really technically think could actually go on and win is the new governor of Maryland. I like this paragraph. Democrats would fall right back into disarray. Democrats are rightly proud of the unity they've been displaying in Congress. But the relative ideological unity of the Democrat Party would by no means guarantee a peaceful nomination process if Biden retires. In primaries in which everyone is mostly aligned on the issues, candidates tend to find ways to differentiate themselves. That's when things tend to get ugly. That's when the Elizabeth Warrens turn on the Michael Bloombergs, as you've seen in the past. Of course, the cost would be high, very expensive. Now, it's hard for us, and we shouldn't, I said something on Facebook yesterday, and I really meant it. My football team's only been to one Super Bowl, the New Orleans Saints. And so last night, for true Eagle and Chiefs fans, that was your Super Bowl. Everyone else is just a guest and really should keep their mouths shut and eat their food. But for those who are fans of those teams, that's your Super Bowl. Man, enjoy it. You never know if it's going to happen again. Even with 2 and 4 years for the Chiefs, you never know if it'll happen again. Make a memory. Enjoy your day. I get it. And I feel the same way when I do stuff like this because I'm not a Democrat. I'm not interested in their platform. I'm not interested in their candidates. I would never vote for them. So I should really keep my comments to myself. But the more you look at this, not through the New York Times writer, but through Ed Kilgore's lens, you start getting a really clear picture of whom I believe is really running the show John Podesta is in. If you're John Podesta and Stacey Abrams didn't win, and you got a star in a governor in Maryland, and you can play that card 4 years from now. And you know where all this is headed with Joe out of the way. This is why I think, A, you don't care if he stays in or gets out, but you're probably leaning towards stays in. It's a better play for you. Remember, as much as I think there are divisions in the Republican Party, My concern for the Republicans would be a very heated contest between Ron DeSantis and Donald Trump that won't end in them uniting as the ticket. Probably. Not likely. And if DeSantis comes out on front, I would worry about the 25 to 30% true Trump loyalists who would then unite behind DeSantis. I don't think they would. So you come in limping and divided. But the Democrats, don't forget, they're still at war with themselves. The squad and that movement within their party trying to take over their party. And the odds of them uniting and how ugly it would get. And if they learned anything 4 years ago, they really didn't have anybody. And they may still not have anybody. It's interesting. I think Joe's going to run. And I think for them, I think I'm growing convinced it's their only move. It's 10:51 at Super Talk 99.7 WTN. I want to talk about the Dr. Gill Center. I know when I say that, you think chiropractic care. And I don't mind that. Chiropractic care really works. But we also have state-of-the-art industry equipment like Class 5 lasers and red light therapy and spinal decompression therapy. Dr. Gill was one of the pioneers in our state. That was a game changer. Pinched nerves unpinched, bulging herniated discs repositioned, separation without a scalpel, getting real results. But all of these other state-of-the-art things that are in play are to pinpoint inflammation in the body, reduce pain, swelling, and accelerate healing. So if it's a new year, but you got last year's or for the last decades, same back pain, neck pain, knee pain, hip pain, elbow pain, we can treat it all with no needles and no downtime. And we've treated over 27,000 people in our 3 decades in Franklin. We think everything begins with an accurate diagnosis, and your new patient appointment is only $23. We've extended that into February. $23. That covers your extensive exam, any and all x-rays, and your accurate diagnosis. So don't do nothing, or don't do the same thing you did last year. Get pain-free. Get back to doing what you love. $23 covers everything. Call the Dr. Gill Center today on our new number, 882-4838, 882-4838, 882-4838, or online at callmepainfree.com.
Still trying to clear that crash. Going to be westbound, the downtown East Loop. That's from 24 westbound to 65 north. And we just got an alert from Fox News Digital of a truck running over and dragging people in New York City. Apparently, a New York City councilman tweeting this out. We'll get you the details coming up at 11 on Super Talk 99.7 WTN.
All right, 10:58 in the morning at Super Talk 99.7 WTN. It's interesting. The Democrat machine has become so proficient at gathering and producing votes, they could run anyone, was one of the super text lines. And I understand that frustration. By the way, there have been many, many cases of fraud and irregularities coming out of the Department of Justice as well as coming out of courtrooms across America. So anybody that tells you, if you say that there was any voter irregularities or fraud, you're part of a conspiracy theory on the extreme right that is threatening another January 6th. That's just irrational matrix nonsense. Also, I don't know that anybody has definitively proven enough to sway an overall presidential election. You might be able to come close in some cases in Wisconsin. But having said that, I'm just being reasonable and truthful. I don't play extreme right or extreme left. I would rather have a rational, passionate conversation how they're better at getting people out to vote. Not in motivating them, winning their hearts and minds and inspiring them, literally harvesting ballots, picking people up and taking them. So, I understand your frustration. I understand why some of you are not trusting a free and open election process. But I think, in truth, what the Democrats have done much better legally is engage in early voting. And Republicans are going to have to meet them there and engage in early voting as the Democrats have. That's something clearly Trump didn't do in his reelection campaign. That would be a bad mistake to do again as a party, whether it's Donald Trump or someone else. And then the getting people to the ballots. And then making sure those are real people and real ballots. I get it. I get the frustration. But yeah, they're going to need a candidate. They're going to need a bench. Some of this stuff still does apply. Don't forget, Republicans didn't win in 2002. They did win in 2000 and 2004. And they did win in 2016. And they lost twice with Obama and once with Biden. But it's not like they're incapable of winning presidential elections. In fact, it's 3-3 with the rubber match coming up in 2 years. It's 11 o'clock. News starts now.
Eleven o'clock on the dot. I'm Ken Weaver with your top stories. We still have that crash that is blocking the right lane of 24 westbound right there at 65 north. That is going to be stop and go starting at Shelby Avenue. So the westbound East Loop downtown is still gunked up because of that crash. And then we got some road work right now in Jolton. This has 24 eastbound backed up right before New Hope Road. We just got an alert from Fox News of a truck running over and dragging people in New York City this morning. Fox News says New York City Councilman Justin Brannan tweeted, several people in Bay Ridge, Brooklyn were hit and badly injured by a man driving a U-Haul this morning. The councilman goes on to tweet that a suspect was in custody. President Biden reportedly under growing pressure to comment on the ongoing issues with high-altitude objects.
President Biden has no public events on his schedule today. Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre briefs reporters early afternoon at the White House. The questions will likely focus on the 3 unidentified objects that were shot down over 3 days, Friday through Sunday, at the direction of President Biden. A senior administration official said the president directed the 3rd object be shot down Sunday afternoon over Lake Huron in Michigan out of an abundance of caution. The object was octagonal in structure, unmanned, and traveling at about 20,000 feet. The official said there was no indication it had surveillance capabilities, but the administration cannot rule that out.
As Karen Travers reporting, Election 2020 unfinished business. A judge in Georgia ordered the partial release of a grand jury report This on former President Trump's alleged attempts to interfere in the election. The day of the release will be this Thursday. And Americans in Russia being advised to leave immediately. The U.S. Embassy in Moscow telling U.S. citizens that you are in danger of, looks like, the risk of wrongful detentions. The embassy going on to tell Americans do not travel to Russia at this time. That's the latest news. Weather is next. I'm Ken Weaver, WTN News.
At 11:07, we have sunshine in Middle Tennessee and getting Springer-like more by the moment. We are 58 at the Puffy Muffin in Brentwood, 57 to the north in Hendersonville, downtown at Music Row, naked statues, sunny skies, 59 degrees. Feels like 58 in Nashville at WTN. The market looking good. Dow almost up 300, up 298 at 34,167. NASDAQ up 164 at 11,882. and the S&P's up 38 at 41.29. All three are in the green. Market triple figures up at 11.07. At Super Talk 99.7 WTN. Hit open. Well, don't hit me. Johnny having to pull a double shift today. I guess Mac, win, lose, or draw, was going to take today off after his Chiefs won Super Bowl 57, 38-35. I imagine everybody's looking for something. I know of one person that was texting with me that is just, convinced that, the game is fixed. We have fake news. Now we have fake sports. That's gambling's influence. I just didn't see that. In fact, the one drive somebody was trying to make that point, it didn't end up even being a factor. So now that last call, that's just one of those, if it's week 5, if it's week 8 and you're calling the game close, maybe I call holding, but final drive of a Super Bowl, a little tug on the jersey. I don't know that I would have called it, but I also don't know that I would do a whole show today on how the NFL was purely fixed last night. I thought both teams played well, and it was just an unfortunate ending. It would have certainly been more Disney-like in its finish had they got the field goal, and with a minute 50, there was a drive and a chance for the Eagles to tie. You really can't point your finger. I mean, some people might point a finger to the fumble return for a touchdown by Jalen Hurt, but Jalen Hurt becomes only the second person in NFL history to have 3 rushing touchdowns. He also threw for another. He went 27 of 38 for over 300 yards. He really had the best performance on the game. Patrick Mahomes, nothing to be taken away from him, but only 21 of 27 and 182 yards. 3 touchdowns. 2 of them seemed like broken plays inside the red zone. But a big rushing first down at the end of the game that would have set up the go-ahead field goal, whether there was a minute 50 left or only 4 seconds or 8 seconds. So I thought a great game, well played. We said earlier, Andy Reid gets kudos for sticking with the run. They ran for over 150 yards last night. And I said the Chiefs can run with these 2 running backs. And if they run the football, they'll win. And that'll help their line, which it did. I mean, Philadelphia is probably one of the most dangerous front fours in football and sack leaders. And they protected Mahomes throughout the night. Now, he used his feet, even with a bad ankle, on several occasions, but by and large, mixing in the run played a big role in that, and the offensive line playing great gives a game ball. Chiefs win it, 38-35. Mac gets the day off. By the way, it's the second time in history somebody was down double digits at half and came back to win. The first time, it was bad play calling and Matt Ryan. This time, nothing to blame it on. Great game, 35-35 until the final kick by Harrison Butker, which won the game. Preds finally came back from the All-Star break. They slept through the first one. This one they won. Took them till overtime to beat a very weak Philadelphia Flyer hockey club, but they do on the road Saturday win 2-1. They're home tonight against Arizona at 7 o'clock in Smashville, Bridgestone Arena, or be watching on Valley Sports. And we're going to add Derek Jeter now to the Fox Sports studio team along with A-Rod and Ortiz. And I never watched this, but then again, I didn't watch Rihanna either. The Puppy Bowl was apparently won by Team Fluff, 87-83 over Team Rough. Johnny, do you ever watch it? I've never seen it. I would say that was a high-scoring game. I don't know if you can bet that, but I would assume that went over. And birthdays today, Randy Moss, 46, Peter Gabriel, 73, and Jerry Springer, 79 years old. Judge Jerry. And I hope if it's your birthday, you have a happy birthday today. All right, we were kicking around this whole military shooting down now a 4th flying object. No one had a worse time with this than on MSNBC, Corinne Jean-Pierre. Now, I could do a pop quiz through the super text line or get 5 of you on the air. I think I would have passed it. I think I would have said North American Air Defense. I don't think I would have said aerospace defense. And I don't know if that was originally air defense and they changed it. I mean, I just go by my memory. I would have at least said North American Air Defense. I mean, that much I know, what it is. But But when you're on MSNBC and you would think you're prepared, I mean, there's a lot of things with Corinne I feel sorry for. In that, I think it's by and large an undefendable presidency. But this one she probably should have had. And I guess it's also a way to take a cheap shot. And there's a moment in this, although I'm looking at the glass and I'm seeing some reflections. And I cannot quite make out if there is something, but she looks down like for her notebook that isn't there. And so if you ever wanted to have fun with a bad moment, well, here's Corinne Jean-Pierre without her notebook.
Why is the American military shooting something out of the sky over Canada?
Because it's part of NORAD. The NORAD is part of it's a what you call a coalition, a consortium,
a pact of nations.
A pact,
okay.
Exactly. And so that's why we were able to do that. Again, we didn't do it on our own. We did it clearly in step with.
Yeah, clearly, of course, clearly. All right, so that's a bad moment. But let's just make this really simple for everyone. We've shot down 4 objects now. I can get into the nuances. The one over Lake Huron was very low altitude. We need some information. We need some clarification. I mean, I think pilots, you're now in piloting airspace. You're now in private piloting airspace. We need to know, is this going to become a daily occurrence? But all nuance aside, you have now shot down 4 units. Now, the first one shouldn't have been controversial. We didn't do it when we could have over the Pacific Ocean prior to crossing the United States. We let it cross the United States, gather information, send information, and we wait till it's done in the Atlantic Ocean to shoot it down. Now, I understand where the divided states of America did a whole hour on that early in the show. And the right's going to say, what a terrible president, he waited so long to shoot it down. We'll have to say, well, he took action. He shot it down. Are we not commenting on 2, 3, and 4 because we're afraid of having the kind of discussions or reactions from 1? If you're an American citizen sitting at home, you deserve a transparent government. Communication is effective for understanding and reducing paranoia. And the longer you just leave this hanging, I mean, are legitimate radio and television personalities left to say it's possibly an alien? Do we now believe in aliens? Are we going to let this linger so long? How long does it take us? Are all 4 of these Chinese? How long have all 4 been hanging around in the sky? Is this part of their response to us shooting down the first? They send 3 more? Are we just shooting down private drones? I'm sitting reading up on all this during the Super Bowl. I should have just enjoyed the game because I couldn't get anywhere. The United States military shot down an airborne object that was spotted flying at a high altitude over Lake Huron. Well, actually, a lower altitude. It was the 4th flying object shot down over North American airspace in a week. Well, there's only been a comment about 1. The Pentagon said the object, the octagonal structure with strings attached to it. If we find out this was a someone's, kite that was let go. Strings attached to it appeared to have passed near the U.S. military sites. Everybody's wanting to know, is this another Chinese surveillance balloon? Yes or no? How long is this going to go on? Are we just not going to comment on 2? Are they going to wait like 4 more days and comment on 2 and not 3 and 4? And by then we will have shot down 8? So Friday, we had an unidentified cylindrical object that was brought down over Alaska's North Slope. No details, no comments. Saturday, another object flying in Canadian airspace, shot down in conjunction with Canada by the U.S. military. And then yesterday, one brought down over Lake Huron. first spotted on radar in the morning, was tracked through the day until the military brought it down with an 9X Sidewinder. You want to know how the story ends? Little information has yet been released about the last 3 incidents. And recovery efforts are still underway. Nothing. AWOL. I mean, unless you count what I just played you on MSNBC with Corinne. This is ridiculous for a country that understands, and then you get leaks of payload. The next thing I got people in my house asking me, well, is a payload a bomb? Could be a bomb. Could be electronic surveillance equipment. Could be a biological weapon. I mean, is it a payload of COVID? I don't know what the heck it is. But how long does it take to communicate to the American people what you've shot down? And the longer you wait, the more ridiculous the speculation is going to get. At some point, we need a president of the United States to come forward with transparency and communicate to the American people, as he did with Object 1, what we know about Object 2, 3, and 4. But as of 11/19, still crickets. 11:19 at Super Talk 99.7 WTN. I want to do the final say, and I don't know if we might get started right after this break. It's a Fox News story that says next on the Dems hit list is the suburbs. That is an agenda already in progress. It was their next step years ago, but it is always their step. And thanks to a governor in Michigan, we're getting a more clear view of their step. And I think it's a view you need today to be aware of. So I want to make sure this story doesn't fly under the radar and give you an explanation why I'm going to shoot it down next on WTN. I'm Michael Delgiorno for Paul Winkler Inc. One of the things I love about Paul and his team is that they voluntarily hold themselves to the highest level of fiduciary duty out there. And because of that, the government requires that I tell you I'm paid every time this commercial airs, and that there's an incentive for me to say good things about Paul and his team. It's funny other industries don't require that, but hey, I don't make the rules. I'm actually a client of Paul's, and I can tell you that he brings an understanding of the investing world I haven't seen anywhere else in all my years. He helps me understand what I'm doing and why, so I don't worry about investing or second guess my decisions. There's nothing more unnerving than getting close to retirement age and wondering, have you saved enough to keep from having to go back to work? Or worse, move in with your kids? Paul and his team have the most sophisticated tools I've ever seen for testing your financial plan and helping you sidestep the risks of running out or outliving your investments. And best of all, every office is run by a degreed planner.
Hi, I'm
Set
Paul
up a free
Winkler.
15-minute
I've been
phone
teaching
call today.
investing
10 offices in Middle Tennessee,
Nashville
one phone
Airways
number.
for
Call
over 20 years with the Investor
851-1950,
Coaching Show.
851-1950, or
And
online
in
at
that time, I taught a lot about
paulwinkler.com.
how markets work and how we invest money and academic principles of investing money. But I've also talked an awful lot about how to avoid the mistakes that people often make with their money. Think about it. A lot of people sold out of the market at the worst time when COVID struck, or when TARP happened, the Troubled Asset Relief Program, or gold, they invested in that at the worst time. Bailing out of the market because they were worried about Y2K or 9/11 or jumping into energy stocks or jumping into cryptocurrency. One of the things that I like to do is educate investors because I believe that the more educated you are, the more confident you are, and the more confident you are, the more successful you can be as an investor. Now, I not only do that on our radio show, but we do that in our offices around the Nashville region, 10 offices. To learn more about our approach to investing and financial planning, go to paulwinkler.com and set up a free 15-minute phone call. Or you can call 615-851-1950.
Got a traffic problem in Cheatham County right now. They got some road work with the right lane blocked, backing things up 24 eastbound right before New Hope Road. And a new CDC report sheds some light on teen girls and record high levels of sadness and violence. These stories are more at 11:30 on Super Talk 99.7 WTN.
Is that recent, Ken, that we renamed a county after the Kansas City Chiefs? Cheatham County? Nah, I don't know why I'm feeding that nonsense. All right, I like to find stories that I think are interesting. I don't always agree completely. This is basically a Fox op-ed piece by Betsy McEnany, I think is how I would say it. McCaughey. Betsy McCaughey.
Oh.
I think MC, big C, AUGHEY would be McCaughey.
McConney.
Well, there's no N, so I don't think you say McConney.
Oh.
Just McCaughey. Anyway, you probably never heard of her, and that's why we can't pronounce her name. But the headline is, next on the Dems hit list, the suburbs. Well, first of all, the headline didn't grab me because they've been targeting the suburbs for a long time. When their worldview, their policy views fail, well, first of all, it's just an elite administrative state worldview in general. In other words, they can have a worldview, but you can't. They can have a policy view, but you can't. Then they demonize your opposing view. But it's all about control. But they have been doing this for quite some time. This is where they want to control where you live and don't live. They're trying to force you to live in the city because you have to work near where your job is in order to save us all from global warming. So it's not the first time they've targeted the suburbs, but I kept reading, and she makes some great points. One of her points is they're going to target the suburbs. If you've worked hard to afford a suburban home, you're now under attack, and they don't care if the others don't have money to be there. So her op-ed piece begins, if you've worked hard to afford a suburban house with a patch of lawn for your kids to play on, you're under attack. The Biden administration and Democrats in New York, Connecticut, and other states are fighting local zoning laws in order to build high-rise apartment buildings with affordable units in tree-lined single-family neighborhoods. So now it becomes a zoning issue, and who has authority for that zoning issue. I want to get all these other things kind of out of the way. First of all, we don't have an administrative state. I know John Podesta believes we do, wants us to, thinks we do, and runs one, but our government hasn't been overthrown yet, and we don't have an administrative state. We have a republic. Not a democracy, not mob rule, a republic. A government of laws with branches of government. And the executive branch isn't the most powerful of branches, nor is it an administrative state. Bottom line, it has no authority and no jurisdiction to dictate such a thing. Now, we did a whole hour on equity and what we will do in the name of equity. And we got a warning from a North Korean who fled North Korea to come to this country only to sit in Columbia University and be taught in the name of equity all the things that created communist North Korea. And she's trying to give you a warning. Well, here's another thing in the name of equity, meaning everyone can live in the tranquil suburbs, whether they've earned the money to pay for it or not. That's what the White House thinks it has jurisdiction and authority to dictate to communities across the country, as if states' rights don't exist, as if county and municipal zoning doesn't exist. And if I can get rid of one last thing before the bottom of the hour news, this notion that you can't ship immigrants, illegal immigrants, to their elite communities like Martha's Vineyard or even New York City without overwhelming them. They have no problem after their failed worldview, their failed policy views, shipping their people from the inner city to the suburbs. But the ultimate lesson of this op-ed piece, to some degree more me than the op-ed piece, is lost in this whole conversation is authority and jurisdiction. And don't forget, if you oppose it now, I'm thinking in Franklin, people love to call Franklin elitist and white. All right, so you've got beautifully zoned neighborhoods. That's what I would say Franklin, Brentwood to a great degree has done really well. Franklin maybe and Cool Springs have done the best. We never look like a hunk of cement. There's always green between the road and the parking lot and the businesses. And I'm grateful for that. I grew up in New Orleans. We didn't have a lot of land. It was just one big sea of cement, then levees and water. A lake to your north, a river to your south. Power lines, cement, and businesses right up on the road. It was so ugly. So now you've worked hard to zone and keep everything beautiful, residential, industrial, retail, commercial. And now a president in Washington, D.C. is going to say, you got to plop a high rise in the middle of downtown Franklin. And not only do you have to fill it with people from other areas, but they get to live there without paying. All in the name of equity. And now, for those that don't believe in God or a republic or states' rights or municipalities, to stand against that or have a problem with that, well, you're just racist and hate others. But they got quite the racket going, don't they? It's coming to a city near you very soon. It's 11:30.
.30 on the dot. I'm Ken Weaver with your top stories. Again, got some road work slowing things down in Cheatham County. Jolton, that's going to be 24 eastbound right before New Hope Road. And now got a medical emergency with the right lane blocked. This is going to be north downtown, 65 northbound, right there at I-24. So that has been a hot button issue all morning long. 24 north to 65, and it is again because of a medical emergency. Teen girls are experiencing record high levels of sadness and violence, according to a new CDC report that says nearly 3 in 5 teenage girls said they feel persistently sad or hopeless. And by the way, if you are struggling with thoughts of suicide or you're worried about a friend or a loved one, you can get help by calling 988. That's the latest news. Weather is next. I'm Ken Weaver, WTN News.
At 11:36, it is spring-like, sunny, and 60 in Franklin this hour, 59 in Mount Juliet, 60 down in the borough. Downtown on Music Row, still the warm spot. Sunny, 61 degrees, feels like 60 in Nashville at WTN. The market's been wonderful all day. The Dow is now over 300 up at 34,171. NASDAQ up 165 at 11,883. And the S&P is up 39 at 4130. All three are in the green. The market is dramatically up at 1137. All right, Super Bowl 57 goes to the Chiefs, 38-35, a Harrison Butker game-winning field goal with just 8 seconds remaining. And the Chiefs get their second Super Bowl in 4 years. MVP, Patrick Mahomes, 21 of 27, 182 yards, 3 touchdowns. Preds won 2-1 in overtime over Philadelphia Saturday morning. They faced off at 11:30. They ended up winning in overtime Saturday afternoon. They play Arizona tonight in Smashville at 7 o'clock, and that's sports on the Talk Station, Super Talk 99.7 WTN. All right, so let's go. We kind of covered all the different angles of what's wrong with this story, but this is a story I don't want you to miss. I don't think it's the first time that the suburbs are being targeted. They don't like you moving with your feet. You know, that really is the last voting right you have. If you live in California, we're experiencing a lot of new residents from California. When consistently your governors and your legislature have such a specific worldview and agenda that has failed you, failed your schools, failed your communities in terms of public safety, failed your economy in terms of affordable housing and jobs and pay and the overtaxation, you finally vote with your feet. And you leave. And we know the pattern, right? They leave from New York. They leave from California. They leave from Illinois. And where do they go? Texas, Tennessee, Florida, primarily Texas and Florida. Which is why I'd be so excited to see a presidential race between Gavin Newsom and Governor DeSantis. So we could, if nothing else, for a year, discuss the difference between California and Florida. Because the left isn't interested in just controlling the states they control. Into bankruptcy, into chaos, into violence. They want to control the entire nation with this failed worldview and policy view. This is the trap they have set for themselves. So it's not the first time the suburbs have been targeted because they don't want you to leave your city and walk with your feet to the suburbs. Now, at the very root of this is just reality and common sense, right? If I have person A and person B, and I know both, some choose to take the same amount of money and live in Davidson County. Some choose Wilson or Williamson or Rutherford. Shouldn't that just be their choice? Isn't that their right? Isn't that their choice? I love when I always hear, well, I can't afford Williamson County. I'd like to know what's so much more in Williamson County. I mean, I can see homes valued at the same rate, but by and large, maybe it's home values. I don't think it's taxation differences. It's not that much. But to each his own, right? You work. You get whatever the government allows you to keep, which it shouldn't be, but is the reality, and then you choose where you want to live. But if the case was true, well, I can't afford Williamson County. All right, well. Should we put a cap on what homes can sell for so you can? Should we just make homes free for you if you want it? Well, you would say, no, of course not. Then I just go somewhere I can afford. I can tell you this, just so you know, make it personal. I didn't take a job in San Francisco. I wasn't interested in a 100-year mortgage. I wasn't interested in that taxation. I wasn't interested in that housing expense. I didn't particularly think the schools looked that great in the areas that I could afford, and maybe less safe in areas I could afford. I chose not to go. That's how real life works. But no, that's not how this can work anymore. It's no longer an option. Like we learned in the 9 o'clock hour, in the name of equity, we can do all kinds of unspeakable un-American things. So the op-ed on Fox reads like this. If you've worked hard to afford a suburban house, if that's your American dream, you saved up enough for a down payment, you bought a house in the suburbs because for you, that's what you wanted for your kids. A big lawn to play on, area parks for the schools, what have you. Another person making the same amount of money want to give people the ultimate urban experience. But that's their choice. Well, the op-ed says now you're under attack. The Biden administration and Democrats in New York, Connecticut, and other states are fighting local zoning laws. Oh, wait a minute. You're fighting local zoning laws in order to build high-rise apartment buildings with affordable units in these neighborhoods, all in the name of equity? So that anybody, whether they earn it or not, can enjoy the tranquil suburban life, despite whatever the municipal laws are? Despite whatever impact it would have on the investments already made? Of course they think they can. But you would be right to point out we're the United States of America. We do not have an administrative state where somebody in Washington, D.C. can dictate what can be built in my neighborhood. We have states for that. We have counties for that. We have municipalities for that. That is very un-American. But they don't care. The Biden administration announced January 19th that it will require all towns across the United States. Where does that authority come from? You must submit equity plans. You must show us how you will make it possible for low-income people to live in your communities with affordable housing, transportation, and other resources. Remember when we were talking about what is the inalienable rights of the American people from your founding fathers? Meaning they come from God, a God you've rejected, not man, not your founding fathers, not the law, not the Constitution, but acknowledged by man as coming from God. Life, liberty, and a pursuit of happiness. That has now been replaced with equity. Even if I got to steal it. Now, nobody's moving to give me, where I'm at in life, equity to move into some higher neighborhoods in Brentwood. So success has been generalized. It has been demonized. If you have, and this is the true operating force, spirit behind America's far left ideology, it's envy. So who's poor? Who's rich? Who gets to live in these? Since when does the federal government tell a local municipality that it has to show them plans to create these, let alone the authority and jurisdiction to mandate them? This is why I know it sometimes sounds boring, but this is why you hear when David's on the show with me, we talk so much about an administrative state. Well, you're trying to figure out if Joe Biden is going to run or not. The truth of the matter is, it's John Podesta, who's been president for 18 years. He was running the show for 8 years with Clinton. He was running the show for 8 years with Obama. He's been running the show for 2 years with Biden, and he'll run the next 2. And if he can get the next candidate lined up, he'll run the next 4 after that. And he believes, along with George Soros, it's an administrative state headed by fill in the blank. Boy, and they're acting like it. They're legislating like it. Towns that don't meet these cookie cutter requirements, so you want to know, all right, there's the threat, right? You better show us how you're going to erect these high-rise affordable housing for the poor and not just provide them the affordable housing, but transportation and other resources for free. And if you don't, it's all done in the name of diversity and equity. We're going to cut off any federal funding. It reminds me of the Nashville Rescue Mission. Because if we took any federal money from the very beginning, let alone for the last 6 decades, you would have reached no one. You would have changed no lives. You take their money, you take their worldview, you take their policies, you take their control. And then you get their outcomes. And there's been no greater failure in the war against poverty than the war against poverty in the left. It's now going on a 75-year worst failure in human government history. I don't have to tell you how well they've done education since 1979. So at the National Rescue Mission, we don't take any government money, because if you take government money, then you got to get rid of Jesus. And if you get rid of Jesus, then we got nothing. This is what municipalities are going to have to do. We already know this is the solution for common education. Federal government was never in the education business since 1979. They've done nothing but screw it up since. Which is why you will never have local education that works until you abandon the federal government education. Because if you take their money, well, then you got to take all of their rules and regulations along with it, and they don't work. See graduation rate. See ACT scores, SAT scores. See safety in schools. They will major in every minor and minor in every major. They will indoctrinate your children. They will socialize your children. They will control your children or get them used to being controlled, but they will not prepare them for higher education, and they will not prepare them for the workforce. You've got to abandon their money in order to make it work. It's all a control game. Nothing is free. Oh, you don't need a husband. You don't need a man. You don't need anybody to provide. The government will take care of you, and they'll control you. No one's denying there's a housing shortage. New York Governor Kathy Hochul is pushing some reasonable proposals, such as allowing a mother-in-law apartment or relaxing environmental restrictions on residential buildings. But Hochul's biggest proposal, the housing compact. It's another misguided attack on local control and single-family housing. It will compel each town and village in New York to increase its housing stock to meet a uniform state-imposed target and rezone for high-density housing projects within a mile of every MTA train station. Say goodbye to quaint downtowns. I'm thinking of the village of Liverpool, just outside of Syracuse. Say goodbye to quaint downtowns lined with two-story buildings. Say hello to the new. Cheap housing and whoever that allows to move in. And whatever comes along with it. All mandated. And the municipality ought to look at the county or look at the state and say, what rights do you claim? Let alone a president in Washington and what rights they claim. You know, we always talk about how we don't really have understanding anymore. We have narratives and narrative repeating. Well, here's another great example of that. And in the social dilemma, in the circle, in the matrix, the left will look at this and say, that's equity. And the right will say, how is this American? How is this a republic? How is this law and order? How is this fair? So I end with the blanket, overwhelming truth that we always talk about. You are living as a nation no longer under God, and that has opened the doors to a godless society and culture and chaos. And as I've always warned you, you never abandon something without replacing it. So you may say, I don't care if we abandon God. William Federer wrote one of the greatest books, What's in One Nation Under a God, even for the godless and the atheists? A lot. This is the kind of chaos that comes from replacing God, a republic, law and order, and a pursuit of happiness with this spirit of envy, communist, socialist worldview of an administrative state, elitists over the sheeple and people. And the next new battleground the suburbs are being targeted. I bet you didn't even know that in the news because they didn't want it in the narrative. It's 11:52 at WTN. So, Johnny, what did we decide? I've heard from one of my friends, Sandy Patty did the national anthem in the 80s at a Super Bowl that was supposedly spectacular. I don't remember that. I remember Whitney Houston because it was after the original Gulf War began. Yeah. That seems, you go back and you listen and you go, I'll never forget, like Jose Feliciano did a guitar sing national anthem for a World Series. It just blew me away. And it was so different is what made it blow me away. For Whitney Houston, it may have been the moment that blew us away and her vocal abilities.
Yes.
It certainly brought her stardom to another level. I just wanted to, and we're down to a little more than 2 minutes. I had very, very high. I knew there was a lot of woke stuff planned, and I can't control that. And I don't want to focus on the negative, but just focusing on the positive. I thought that this was either next to Whitney Houston, my second. Maybe there's been some others. I don't know if there's one that comes to mind for you, Johnny, or those on the super text line, but I really think this was one of the top 2 or 3 national anthems I ever heard. And it's our very own Chris Stapleton. And I thought it was very moving.
And you see by the dawn's early light was so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight. Oh, the ramparts we walked were so gallantly streaming, and the rockets regular up on spur, singing up, yeah, through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say, does that star-spangled banner yet wave? Oh, the land of the free and the home of the brave.
Chris Stapleton, I think, with a knockout version of the national anthem for Super Bowl 57. Worthy of the nation I love. I hope we're living worthy of the sound of that song. We'll try better tomorrow. I'll see you tomorrow morning at 9. Matt Murphy's next on WTN.